Dr. Seuss would be proud of us, not only for reading, but also rhyming. Welcome to the Thinklings podcast, a conversation where good thoughts help renew the mind with the Word of God. I'm Charlie Carter, and I'm here with Tim Little and Andy Stearns. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the Thinklings podcast. Happy Boxing Day.
Happy Boxing Day.
Shalom.
Oh.
And we all celebrated Boxing Day? Have we read books today?
I did.
Listener, we're recording this on Boxing Day, and so we are in the midst of the celebrations currently.
And if you didn't catch that, in a couple episodes ago, we christened a new holiday. Instead of Boxing Day on December 26th, we did it.
We did.
We didn't just do it, we declared it. December 26th is no longer Boxing Day. It is Boxing Day for all of those who love the life of the mind. It is a day that you gift books and you read the books you were gifted. And so, not that you couldn't give a book on Christmas, but why not?
Wasn't it supposed to be like you read the books
that's
that you received on Christmas?
Yes, that's how it started. But in the last 2 weeks, things have molded and shifted.
Okay. And now books have been exchanged.
And now we're also thinking that we should exchange books too. But if you can only read the books you get, that's good enough.
We could also make it like Festivus, which begins with the airing of grievances.
No.
We'll strike that one.
No, let's take that one out. We can't keep records of wrongs.
That's from one of the most popular TV shows of the 90s right there. But anyway. So, happy Boxing Day.
Thank you.
Any other noteworthy things before I tell them what's in this episode?
I don't think so.
No.
Here's what we're going to do in this episode. We are going to have some Andy's weekly wisdom, and he has some things he's going to share about that. We do have some listener feedback that's going to then launch us into the main idea of this podcast. We have an email about reading and listening to the same book at the same time. Ooh. And then we are going to do that thing we always do. And then the main content of the episode is how to read more in 2024.
Ba-dum-dum.
Dr. Seuss would be proud of us, not only for reading, but also rhyming. And then we will end.
That was good.
Who is Dr. Seuss anyway? And then we're going to close with a meditation in God's Word to help us focus our minds on reading in 2024. And so here's where we're going to put the swoosh into the episode, which we are doing now, if you haven't noticed.
I was about to make the noise, but I forgot you're actually editing them in now. So
yeah, it'll be there. It'll just be there for us.
So this week I got a quote from a book by Paul Tripp called A Shelter in the Time of Storm, Meditations on God and Trouble. This book was recommended to me by my buddy Jeff Newman, and he and I tried to read through it at the same time as Radiation was beginning with Robin, and he was able to keep on track, and I was much, much more behind. But I thought it was a very good book. I think I've already recommended it on the podcast. So if you're walking a path of trouble, this is a good book for you. And he goes, I believe it's through Psalm 27. He goes like verse by verse through it. And I will say that, and if you're a Tripp reader, you know this, sometimes you understand why he picked this meditation from this snippet of the scriptures. And other times you don't exactly, but it's not like he's usually not saying wrong things. But in this one part of the verse is talking about beauty, and he said this, and I thought this was nourishing and thoughtful. So this is a quote from the book. He says, the beauty of the created world was never meant to be the beauty that would fill the eyes of our hearts. It was never meant to be the beauty to which we would look for satisfaction and peace. It was never meant to be the beauty that we would give ourselves to search for, to live for, to cry for, and to die for. No, the physical glories of this created world are meant to be sign glories. The amazing beauty that surrounds us every day was designed to be a sign beauty. All of the beautiful things that we see, touch, taste, and hear every day are designed to be signs that would point us to the ultimate beauty that can be found only in the one who created them. So I like this quote for two reasons. I think sometimes people really get into aesthetics in a good sense, But I think what his caution is if you're aesthetically minded and you value beautiful things, he's just saying don't make the beauty itself the thing you're chasing. And so I teach apologetics, and there's lots of arguments for God's existence from beauty because it doesn't serve any purpose in natural world or evolution and all that. So I just thought that was interesting when you see something beautiful and you go, wow, that wow should be directed not at the beautiful thing, but at the one who created the beautiful thing. So that's it. That's my comment. You look like you had something to say, Tim.
No, just the emphasis on aesthetics and how it's pointing to something.
Yeah.
I really like that,
Mm-hmm.
just because so many there's like a de-emphasis on aesthetics.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like I'm speaking against all the time. It's like, hey, aesthetics are important. You need to pay
They really
attention
are.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
But then in speaking, hey, aesthetics are important, the pendulum seems to shift over to like it's more than it's too important, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know the words to
It's
say it.
important in the wrong way.
Yeah, it's like
in the
it
wrong
should be
manner.
something loved, but it can't
Yeah.
be the chief love.
Yeah, it's because it should be derivative from. So anyways, I thought his sign, like a signpost pointing at something, I
Yeah.
thought was a good metaphor for beauty.
Yeah.
And so that was a helpful thought. So maybe that'll help you.
Let's have some listener feedback or emails. And so I'm going to read an email that was sent to us by Seth Bishop. Thank you, Seth, for writing in. And right on cue with some of the other announcements and listener feedback we've had. We've talked about, I think just a couple weeks ago, about what order should we read the books of Narnia in. And here's what Seth says. So this was my first time reading the Narnia books, and I was recommended to read them in publication order, and that's exactly what I did. Shout out to Caleb Nichols and Emma Smith for the recommendation. I can honestly say that for my first read through of the series, it was 100% worth it to go in publication order and not chronological. The Silver Chair was my favorite, and to my own surprise, my second favorite, in terms of world building, no pun intended, was actually Magician's Nephew.
That was good.
I had a much richer reading experience having to connect the dots of the timeline myself rather than have it presented to me in a chronological succession. I would never have appreciated Magician's Nephew near as much if I started with it, and it makes the payoff at the very end of Last Battle more potent and pleasing. So, here, let's make another soundbite. Round of applause.
Seriously, that was really good.
That would be the Thinklings recommendation as well, to read them in publication order. And so glad that you read through them and enjoyed them, Seth. We also like the Silver Chair, mainly for Puddleglum.
I like the apologetic part of it, but mainly for Puddleglum.
Yeah, I mainly,
Yeah.
I like, well, we won't get into quoting Puddleglum.
Keep going.
So he has then a question of methodology. However, my method for reading it was a bit different, and I'm curious what y'all's thoughts.
Ooh, we're in Texas.
What y'all's thoughts and opinions would be on it. I listened to an audiobook version whilst, I like that word, whilst.
Keep going.
Whilst also reading and following along in the books. So I did some of both. So to imagine it, he's got the book, hard written copy, and he's listening to it at the same time. So he's double dipping. I also had the audiobook on ×2 speed to build up my comprehension speeds and get through them faster. I wouldn't do that with thought-provoking books, or more thinky books is what I'll transliterate or interpret to. But since these are children's stories, I thought it was fine to not focus on deep meditation while reading and just enjoy the story. To conclude, I'm curious what your opinions are on the reading and listening method, and I also highly recommend reading the Chronicles of Narnia in publication order, not chronological order. Seth Bishop.
Ooh, I'm going to give him 5 emoji light bulbs.
5
Well
emoji
done.
light bulbs.
Well done.
And so,
No, I'll give him 7, 1 for each of the books.
so when we get to the main content of this episode, we're going to talk about ways or tools that you could utilize to read more. And listening to things is going to come up on that list. But before we move on, would you want to say anything about that method?
Well, I think I've done that before, and the only reason I don't do it more regularly is it requires sitting in one spot and having the book out And generally when I need to listen, it's because I've got other things going on. But I will say, I really like this part of it. I mean, I don't know if you've done it before, but my mind like one of the hard things about reading is your mind wanders. That book that I started reading and never finished, The Shallows, How the Internet is Messing Up Our Mind, the main problem that the guy was going to address was that, 20 years ago, he could sit down and read one book for 4 hours and not really struggle with his mind drifting. But he said ever since the internet got created, you can click on anything you want at any time. His attention span, like muscle, has like shrunk. And so what I think is when you're listening to it and you're looking at it, it's taking up more of your senses. And I feel like it was easier for me to focus. So I thought it was a helpful, I don't want to say crutch because that makes it sound like you shouldn't use it, but I thought it was a helpful tool. So I think that sounds great. I like it.
I think it is a nice tool. And I think if you can read without it, and you can read, effectively, that's great. But I think where it would shine is that, you know what, I'm drifting.
Yeah.
And then put an earbud in and turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find the right speed, your mind has to be engaged.
Because I think they say, like, you can talk at, 150 or 250 words a minute or something, but you can think at like 400. The thing I ran into, which I had this question and then he answered it in his email, is at times I would listen to it and I'm so focused that I start reading ahead of the reading because I'm going faster and then I'm having to wait for it to catch up. But he doubled the speed. I should try that. I don't think I ever tried moving the speed around.
So as students struggle increasing their speed in reading. And so the time component, being able to increase, and plus on Audible, you can 1.5 times it or 2.6 times it or whatever else. So if you have the actual paper book in front of you, I think what this could, I've actually wanted to test this. I haven't. Listener, if you have, then let me know how it goes. But have an audio recording going while reading the book at the same time to increase your ability to read faster.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's not so much
like
to enjoy the story. You're training your brain to be able to read through words faster.
That's what it is. Instead of a crutch, it's a training tool.
Yeah,
I like it.
When he said it, that's what I was more thinking. Now, it's fiction. I mean, my mind starts to wander and drift. Sure, sometimes when I'm reading a book, but usually not fiction. But anyway, I mean, so for whatever that's worth. Cons, I see some cons to this. One is that you're going to have to have your earbuds in, or everybody else is going to hear the book. And then you have the paper right in front of you. So there's just more pieces. And you have to buy the book twice, unless you have like a subscription or something.
Oh, Tim, I've done that many times, sadly.
Yeah.
In fact, like when it comes to Blu-rays or DVDs, we would always buy them with the digital code too. So we got it all at once. They haven't started that yet with books. I mean, you can buy the Audible narration for extra, but there are just times where I kind of want it in all the formats, depending on where I'm going to be. It feels like a waste, but
anyway,
worth it.
Great thought, Seth. And to all listening, if you have not read the Chronicles of Narnia, I mean,
say it, Charlie. Say it.
I don't think I should say what I want to say. Seems a little rash.
Well, no, I thought you were just going to encourage him to read it. That's all. I wasn't saying anything else.
We encourage you to read it.
Okay, well done. On to the next thing.
We have some Thinklings business to tend to.
Books and business.
Let's talk about some books. Who wants to go first?
Or you go.
So my Boxing Day book is...
So tell us about how'd you get the Boxing Day book?
I walked over to the bookstore and took it off the shelf.
Oh, he bought himself a book. Is that legitimate on Boxing Day, Charlie?
I think so. I did not have any books gifted to me until today, which I do. So I do have a book that was gifted to me like 3 hours ago, but I haven't been able to read any of it yet.
Hey, self-gifting on Boxing Day should be totally allowed. We should make that a thing. All right, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I didn't get a book
Tim's
either.
Tim's face.
I don't get books for people. Don't like buying me books. I've told you that.
Yeah, that's right.
I've had some people do it a few times.
As someone who has sent a manuscript to you and had you send it back, I understand that sentiment. If that's the way that you read other books,
you're horrendous.
That's what you told me. That's
You deserved
Apropos.
every one of those.
It's making me better.
Tim's a really good editor, people. That's all we're saying. He's a really good editor.
I don't. Anyway. Okay, so I did technically get one book. I didn't think about this one. It's not really a book, but it was in the form of a book. I actually got Hebrew Jeopardy
What?
for Christmas.
That's awesome.
And it's in a box that's in the shape of a book.
No.
Yeah, it's all the Hebrew letters on
That is
the little
fantastic.
things, and so we can play Hebrew Jeopardy. You guys want to play sometime? I think I'll win.
I do. I agree. I'm going to
I
say.
remember some of the songs. Thief code, thief code, thief code. No.
Okay, so for my book is 10 Dead Gals You Should Know. So on the cover art here, they have 10 dead, and then they have guys, but then they have it crossed out. And they have gals you should know. Leaving an Enduring Legacy by Rachel Ciano and Ian Maddock. So I've been just getting a pulse on publishing and the publishing world. So there's this emphasis within the publishing world, books by women, for women, so on and so forth. This kind of seemed like it may be hitting on that same idea. And so the first chapter is on Mary, the mother of Jesus. I skipped over that chapter entirely just because I thought that was a great inclusion. I might go back to it at some point, but we don't talk about, as Protestants, I think we do Mary a great disservice by not talking about her or studying her life. The second, what's that?
I was going to sing, we don't talk about Mary to the tune of we don't talk about Bruno, but maybe we shouldn't. Keep going.
The second one was Perpetua. She was the higher class woman who had an infant, and she was martyred for her faith.
Is it Perpetua?
I don't know how to say
Also
her
pronounced maybe Perpetua?
It's Perpetua. Okay.
Yeah, she's the one who has the famous painting of her holding the... Okay. Very nice. Keep going.
I think so.
Yeah.
The third one's the main one I wanted to, that I spent my time in, because Catherine of Siena, and I didn't know anything about her, but she was a Catholic woman who encouraged the Pope to move during the Babylonian, what do they call it? The Babylonian captivity thing, where the papacy moved from Rome to wherever the other place was. She wrote Gregory and said, hey, you need to move it back to Rome. And he did. But she died at the age of 33.
Whoa.
And she was Catholic, and she had all kinds of visions and whatever else. So this is where it's like, why did you include her? This is a Protestant book. So anyway, I was a little bit not too excited about that one. And then she had Jane Grey as the next one,
okay.
Which I don't know much about Jane Grey. I began that chapter for Boxing Day, and that's as far as I've gotten.
Can you do you know like what time period she was in?
Lady Jane Grey was Queen of England for 9 days or something.
Yeah, okay.
Like that.
Henry VIII, yeah.
Hmm.
Right? Okay.
Or
no?
Is after Mary
that's
supplanted her.
Yeah, she was the one who was on, and then Mary
killed her.
got her down. Yeah, that's right. Oh, interesting.
So the remaining individuals are Anne Hutchinson, Anne Dutton, Selina, Countess of Huntingdon, Catherine Booth. Do you know those four?
I
don't know any
Booth
of them.
Sounds vaguely familiar. You have to read me something about it, but no, I don't. They don't sound.
So then Gladys Aylward, I know that one. She was a missionary to Africa, and then Corrie ten Boom's the last one.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Who was included? And if I thought through church history, who would I have included?
Well, that was one of my points. Is not those 10.
Nice.
Certainly not Catherine of Siena. In fact, I don't know if I would want my daughter to even. And this is more of a youth fiction title. To be looking at Catherine of Siena, who her ascetic lifestyle, and I mean, she died at age 33 because she didn't take care of her body, and she married Jesus, and it was all kinds of weird stuff going on.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't recommend this book, and it was my Boxing Day book though, because it looked interesting.
How much do you not recommend it?
Would you put it on a stack or anything?
I don't know if I'd put it on the Shack Stack, But my son wants to put Murtagh on the Shack Stack. He's mentioned it many times to me.
Murtagh.
So it's the new Christopher Paolini wrote the Inheritance
yeah.
Cycle, Aragon
Yeah.
and Eldest and all of those. Well, he just came out with a new one,
Mm-hmm.
and my
Oh.
son got it for his birthday. He wanted it, and he said it's really bad. And he's like, "It goes on the Shack Stack, Dad."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Son, I don't know if it's that bad, but anyway." He's like, "Yeah, it is."
I would say part of it though is that one probably would have some research potential if you needed a quick overview of some of these people. So
I mean, the
if you were
font's really big. It's
Oh,
designed
yeah.
to be more of like a youth,
Okay.
I think, biographies type of a title. And plus the whole point is 10 dead gals, and they cross out guys because they're trying to riff off of,
Yeah.
hey, you need to be studying these women from church history. And then you pick 10 women who I'm like,
So what it sounds like to me is there's a very famous clip of Jordan Peterson talking with, I don't even know who this lady is, but they're talking about a company who made a dedicated effort to hire 50-50 men and women for all of the positions of their company. And Peterson then says, well, those 50% women hires are going to be bad hires because in these specific pools, there are just less women going into that industry. And so, throughout time, there are just not a lot. So if you're trying to pull a top 10 and you don't have a huge pool to pull from, someone's going to make the list that probably shouldn't.
That's interesting. So that publisher already has a book, 10 Dead Guys You Should Know.
mm-hmm,
So they're just trying to do the women's version of it. Okay. That makes sense.
mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. That's
But
a
hey.
Boxing Day choice for sure.
That was my Boxing title. Am I
Happy
supposed to
Boxing Day.
Happy Boxing Day.
You know what? And you can read bad books on Boxing Day as long as you put them in the appropriate stack when you're done. You want to go next?
Sure. If you want me to.
Oh, what's happening after this?
We're having advice.
How to read
Oh,
more
that's
in
right. Okay.
We'll
Yeah,
all be
2024.
go ahead.
talking.
Yep.
So listener, I'm going to talk about 3 books, but I'll try to go fast. So the original intent of Boxing Day was to read books, and then we added this get books thing today. And so I brought 2 books that I had been reading. So I was gifted earlier in the month from a listener, Matt Tolosa, the 2nd volume of Every Moment Holy. And this volume covers death, grief, and hope. And so this is a liturgy book, which I'm mostly familiar on how to use it, but they're like sort of recorded meditations or prayers. And I think the intent is to read through them, and if you want to pray them, but what it's meant to do is to shape how you think and shape your soul, if I understand it correctly. Tim, you've kind of read more of these, and I think you've read the first one, Charlie. So if you guys want to chime in, I'm woefully ignorant of these.
I have not read them.
Okay. I thought you're the one who got me into Valley of Vision.
Every Moment Holy, though.
Yeah, but Valley of Vision is a similar type of book.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've done Valley of Vision.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
So I think what I enjoy about these sorts of things is it helps you to think in a way that I think what if you were going to sit down and talk to someone and get advice on a specific issue? They might give you good thoughts on it that are biblical. And so I like this. Now, what I didn't know, and Charlie, you're the one who explained Every Moment Holy to me the first time, is there is like a meditation or a whatever you want to call it on all kinds of situations. But this one's on the season of dying and death. And so I'll just read a couple of these and you can see how they would be hitting close to home. So here's one. It's called For When the News is Bad. For when the seasons are uncertain. For the feelings of infirmities. One for before a medical treatment. One for a time of widespread suffering. There's just lots of, had I had this sooner, I could have been reading it more regularly. The one that I read the other day.
And they're meant to be prayed, right?
Well, I think it is, some are meant to be read by a leader and the people in the traditional liturgical service as a responsive reading. Others are intended for personal use, either read silently or aloud, and still others may contain multiple speaking parts for use as a group. So it doesn't say anything so far about prayer and how to use the book, but I think that's the assumption, is that you pray. Go ahead.
So at the Mapes sisters, who are both married now, they had this hobbit hole, and where basically you eat all day long.
It's glorious.
come whenever you can.
Amazing.
So anyway, what they would do though is they have some specifically on feast days and
And
feasting
they would read those.
in there.
Yeah.
And I prayed. I think I prayed it.
Oh, that's
they
cool.
asked me to pray like one of them.
Okay.
And so that's why I thought that it was more. But I actually don't have a lot of experience with Every Moment Holy.
So all I know is that our friend from Georgia reached out to me once after we mentioned a liturgy a while back and sort of explained it. And I realized, I think there's more behind this than I realized. So I might be using this wrong. And I'm just telling the listeners that. Go ahead.
And so, friend of the podcast, Scott Annual, has a section in his book about discipling children, about what liturgy is. And if you just go to what the word is it's a habit forming idea. And so that in these times of your life, you'd be forming a habit of what?
Yeah.
Of thinking and praying
Yes.
these things. That's the liturgy.
And I think that's what George was trying to bring up to me is the point of it. You are praying it or you are reading it and meditating on it, but the goal is that it shapes you.
Yeah.
And I like that. And right now in this area, I want to be shaped the right way. And so I think the one that I read recently was for the hardship of holidays and special days. And I won't read the whole thing. I probably can't get through it, but it starts off and it says, there are days that I am okay, O Lord, and other days that I wake and cannot bear to face. What awaits? For there are certain days that were once a source of warmth and celebration, of fellowship and life, birthdays, holidays, milestones, anniversaries. Those calendar squares, once colored by the light of bright expectation, now hold the inverse ache of their former delight. Even as I am learning again to take the forward movement of daily life in stride, sometimes these special days arrive and jar me from my newfound rhythm. Past and present overlap, heart and memory feel displaced in time. I can keep reading, but it's thoughtful and it's helping you to think through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was kind of good the other night when I was reading it after the kids had gone to bed and I was just thinking about life and whatnot and missing Robin. It was helpful because that was kind of describing a little bit about what I was already feeling. So I like that. My next Boxing Day title is I got this one for Christmas. Right off my Amazon wish list, Tim, not to make you jealous, since no one's buying you stuff off your wish list.
I should say I got money.
Oh, okay.
And I bought books with it.
That's good. I don't like that Amazon doesn't make their wish lists public anymore. You have to actually email them to other people.
Yeah.
You can't just you could probably post it or something somehow, but. So this book is Philosophy Made Slightly Less Difficult by DeWeese and Moreland. It's a beginner's guide to life's big questions. I love this book. I've only read a little bit of it, but it's just like an introduction to philosophy book, and it's not too much to handle. So I'm reading that one, and then I'll just say what my last one is, but I'm not going to tell you how I got it. I'll leave that for Charlie, who will talk next. This book is Island of Flame, subtitled The Famed Lewis Awakening That Never Occurred and the Glorious Revival That Did. So a friend of mine was telling me that there was this Lewis revival in Scotland that it didn't really happen, but then somehow there was an actual revival that followed it. So I'm totally intrigued by it. I'm part Scottish, so I'm kind of excited about that. I like C.S. Lewis, so I'm kind of excited about that. So this is my Boxing gift that I was given by a friend. So 2 books that I was reading and 1 that I was gifted. That's my Boxing Day books.
Yeah, so Thinkling Little, Boxing gifted books to Andy and I.
Which is where I got that last one.
Which is where he got Island of Flame.
Island of Flame.
And Tim, Boxing Day gifted me Centering Discipleship, a pathway for multiplying spectators into mature disciples.
I forgot which book that was.
And we might mention it later. We'll see what stack we put it on. And so we had some fun comments about it off air, and we have some leaning to maybe thinking it might not be the best book. And we won't get into that.
Which was fully in Thinkling Little's mind when he gave it to you.
Yeah. Yes.
Who's the author?
E.K. Strasser.
What's EK stand for?
I don't know.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. Keep going.
She is the lead pastor of a church in Hawaii. And that might be all you need to know. So, what I was reading earlier today, so reading for Boxing Day.
I didn't catch that. She's the lead pastor in that church.
Well, I'm reading her bio on ivp.com, and we just need to move on.
And what?
I'm reading her bio, and she's also a DO, like an osteopathic doctor. She's co-vocational lead pastor of Ma Kealoha, which means presence in Hawaiian, a non-denominational missional community multiplying in Honolulu, Hawaii.
There we go. You
But-
let us
Moving
know.
on.
We will try not to judge a book by its cover. We'll judge a book by its horrendous content. And so
Hey, that's the way to do it.
Happy
That-
Boxing Day.
that is the real, that is the essence of Boxing Day, is to judge a book by its horrendous content
Not by its
Or-
cover.
or its amazing content.
Yeah, we'll find out. Well, you will. We won't.
Yes. I will distill it for you. Anyway, oh man, there's so many comments. I'm thinking
Keep
in my
going.
head. Yeah. So what I was reading earlier is a book that I had mentioned, weeks or months ago, and the title of it is called "Tales Before Narnia: The Roots of Modern Fantasy and Science Fiction: Classic Stories That Inspired C.S. Lewis." There's also by the same author, so the author's name is Douglas Anderson. There's also one that's Tales Before Tolkien. And so it's like, what were things that these guys were reading that inspired them to write what they wrote? And so I was reading one of the tales in here, and the tale is called The Ant and Amabel, or Amabel. I'm not sure how to pronounce this girl's name. But so let me just give you a quick snapshot of what happens to Amabel. She gets in trouble. I won't tell you how she gets in trouble. It's a cute little getting in trouble story. Her aunt, who's actually her great aunt, banishes her to a room in the house. And while she's there, she finds that inside of this wardrobe is a train station that will take her wherever she wants to go.
Platform 9 3/4 was in the wardrobe.
You're horrendous.
So, okay, as
You're
I
so bad.
as I read it, that's exactly what I thought. This
Oh
is
my goodness.
this is some mixing of Narnia and Harry Potter, where there's like this train station out of nowhere, which, by the way, J.K. Rowling is also
I wonder if Rowling.
British,
Yeah.
and so this was like a British children's story
Of course, there is the train station
in London.
in Silver Chair. That's where they get taken.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. But so I was thinking similar.
Wow.
But anyway, so what's really funny to me, so this is where they're surmising, and I don't know if there's any connections directly in Lewis's writings, because I do know he chronicled what he read and when he read it, usually even how many times he read it. There's no note in the book of Lewis said that he read this when he was a kid, so I'm not sure how they got to it, but it's so similar, where it's a girl in this old house, goes into a wardrobe, goes off to this other land. It's a short story, though. I don't think it's a very long story. It's like 3 or 4 pages. But you can see the seedbed of wardrobe taking me to another land. And so just to share a couple fun parts of it. So what leads to this is, so on a table in this room, there are these bottles of perfume. Okay? So just read so listen to this. I do not know whether the scent of those bottles had anything to do with what happened. It certainly was a very extraordinary scent, quite different from any perfume that I smell nowadays. So this is like before she goes into the wardrobe, she's
Mhm.
smelling these old bottles of perfume. And so there's like this subtle hint that this girl might have gotten high, and that's why she finds the train station in the wardrobe.
What?
So it's the very
What?
the very next paragraph later. So she's smelled these perfumes, and I'm not sure if the scent of those bottles had anything to do with it. When Amabel had sniffed at both bottles and looked in all the pots, which were quite clean and empty except for a pearl button and 2 pins in one of them, she took up the ABC book again to look for Whitby. So it's an ABC book that has like names of towns where her godmother lives. So she's going to grab this book up again, which she'd read earlier. And it was then that she saw the extraordinary name. So this is a place that she can go. where you want to go to. It's all one word, italicized. So she's looking for the town Whitby, and she sees the town where you want to go to. This was odd, but the name of the station from which it started was still more extraordinary, for it was not Euston or Canton Street or Marylebone. It's not one of the normal train stations.
Where you are.
The name of the station was
Where you are.
all one word, Big Wardrobe and Spare Room.
Oh.
What? No.
Does that sound familiar? And below this name, really quite unusual for a station, Amabel read in small letters, single fares strictly forbidden, return tickets, no class nuppence. Trains leave Big Wardrobe and Spare Room all the time. And under that, in still smaller letters, you had better go now.
No way.
And so, and it's at that point where I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of fun.
That is cool.
So it just, they're supposing that, Lewis read this and it's, a seedbed of where does he get this idea of a wardrobe from?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole point why you're reading the story. My favorite quote of the story, which I do think this is a really fun quote. So while she's on the train, you can also get what you want to eat. There's buttons in the train. The button for what you want to eat, what you want to drink, and what you want to read.
Oh, nice.
And so she sees these buttons, and what does the child do? She presses all the buttons at once. This is what I want to eat. I want to drink. I want to read. And I just thought it was funny. They're on the train, and so let's get some snacks and let's eat and drink. It's a good time. Very appropriate.
Yeah,
for Boxing Day.
Like that's the Boxing Day train.
Ooh.
Yeah, that might be the liturgy of Boxing Day in years to come. We eat what we want to eat. We drink what we want to drink.
Coffee.
And we read what we want to read.
Yes, that's true.
So here's the quote following that that paragraph. There's nothing more luxurious than eating while you read, unless it be reading while you eat.
Oh, that's good.
Amabel did both. They are not the same thing, as you will see if you think the matter over.
That's so good.
So eating while you read is different qualitatively from reading while you eat. And if you think about it, you'll catch the difference.
There's an emphasis.
And I just thought that was such a funny little paragraph.
That is.
Like, I'm just eating a snack while I read. Well, are you reading and eating a snack, or are you eating a snack and reading? Because there's a difference. And just for a little kid to think about that would be funny to me.
So the place called Where We Are, or what was that?
Where you want to go?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Where You Want to Go. That's
yeah,
what it's
I made
called.
up the Where You Are. I thought that's where it was going to go.
Oh, because I thought, then I was going to say, I wonder if that's where Peterson got his name, Air We Are, in Wingfeather. But I'm not going to.
So yeah,
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting.
When she gets there, her aunt is magically there as well, and they make up and they forgive each other, for the mishap that happened at the beginning of the story. So cute little kid story. Maybe where Lewis got his spare from.
That's
wardrobe and spare
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that's my Boxing Day books.
Woo.
And next,
Swish.
yes, I'll put it right here. How are you going to read more in 2024?
Let's have a thought about reading more in 2024.
So, who wants to jump in on that?
I'll start.
Go for it.
So what you do is you go and you find a book that you want to read. So if you actually want to read a book, you're more likely to actually read it. So what we've done with like our kids is like, listen, you're going to read. That's not an option. So, but you get to choose the content. And then find a time to read. And what that might mean is that you designate a specific time of your day or just even of your week where you say, this is my reading time. So to like encourage our children with this, we have designated like Sunday afternoons as like reading quiet time. We call it quiet time just because you have to stay quiet. So no Legos, no, whatever, it's quiet. So you can read. Now you could, in theory, do something else like take a nap. But obviously when the options are take a nap or read a book, the kids usually prefer to read a book. So Sunday afternoons are a great reading time for me. And that's when I do my reading. And I don't have a lot of reading time just because I'm in books all the time. So I don't know. But I mean, if you're like, I want to read more in 2024, pick Sunday afternoon and just be like, I'm going to have a couple of hours where there's no media. And if you're a father, you can kind of lead your family in this way. Your kids may not be readers either, but you're going to say, hey, I need to read more. You do too. Involve them in the process. And then designate a specific time of the day where you are reading. Your kids can then read, and they can't do like anything else.
So that's interesting because we started that, I don't know, not hard and fast, but we started the Sunday afternoons are you have to entertain yourself. We're going to be quiet. Parents are going to do what they're going to do. You do what you're going to do. And that was for a while my reading time. And then we always do Sunday afternoon naps. But what I started doing is reading myself to sleep. That helped. I mean, I wouldn't always get a lot of reading done. But you're right. It was like a scheduled time. Mm-hmm. So that's good. And the reading, well, anyways, go ahead.
And it isn't an absolute thing. It's not like it happens every single Sunday.
Okay.
But it's like a general pattern. We'll make exceptions to it. I mean, this year, Christmas Eve was on Sunday. And New Year's Eve, those days are just going to be different. But as a generalization, that's kind of a pattern.
So could I summarize, like set a time aside to read a book you actually want to read. So emphasizing the having a time and the desire.
Yes.
So I've actually learned something about myself is I tried to make reading like 10 pages or a chapter like a part of my bedtime routine.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is if I was actually doing the task as it was intended, it was actually keeping me awake. Like it would make me think at night, and then I would try to go to bed after that. It wouldn't have the effect of like calming me down at all. And so I have switched that where I think my best hours of the day are like the first hour.
The morning.
Yeah. It's like wake up, get to porch light, and read. Like sit in the comfy chairs by the fireplace and read.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then I do listen to audiobooks as I go to sleep. And almost exclusively for those audiobooks, those are fictional stories or less thinky books. Because then I don't care if I fall asleep. It's like, I'm putting a sleep timer of 45 minutes knowing I will not make it 5 or 10. And so, yeah. I've listened to chapters 9 through 13 of Out of the Silent Planet every night
that put me to
for the
sleep
last
too.
2 weeks.
I think you told me this when you were doing something like that, and I tried it, and it was the same thing. I'd wake up and I wouldn't remember how far I got, so I'm like, well, I better go back.
That's a great book to put you to sleep.
Hey, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do.
Fitful Triggies have that effect.
Yeah, they do.
So, actually want to read it.
Go ahead.
And have a time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say, so I have a couple, but I'll give one and then we can keep going.
Yeah.
If you have kids, read out loud to your kids. So with the whole cancer path, I knew that I wanted something to be doing with my kids so we weren't just sitting around. I wanted them to have something that they were doing with dad while mom's in the hospital or whatever. And so we started The Hobbit over in maybe January. It was over Christmas break. We got the whole Hobbit read over Christmas break. But I'm telling you, like, there were days I was reading like an hour a day with them, which is, you don't always have that much time. But they really got into it, and it forced me to verbally read slower, which I think, and then make all the voices and whatnot. So we read The Hobbit, read Lord of the Rings. We got part of the way into Two Towers, and it was just too much for my youngest. So then we switched to something she would want to read, which is Green Ember. And we got through most of that. Then we picked up the Boxcar Children. So I told Evan I really want to read Two Towers because I wanted to get through them so we could watch the movies one day. But Abby wasn't really held attention. So now we have 2 books going. We have a Boxcar Children book and Two Towers. And as I look back, oh wow, I read a bunch of fiction this year that I didn't even notice. I've read Boxcar is super easy. But then the kids are sitting next to me. We're reading. So if you have kids, that's like a way you could incorporate more reading.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to at this age read a thinky book, but when they get older, hey, we're going to read Amusing Yourselves to Death. And I could see where you're bringing in the thinky books. And then that would be, because I was talking to a friend who wanted to read more, and they were saying, I don't know how to do it because, like, I'm at home, my kid's there. What I'd be like, hey, kid, go away. I got to read. I'm like, yeah, you can't really do that. But you could like pick books to read, and that would be a beginning point, especially if you're not an accomplished reader. You might feel you start a book and it's too heavy, and that might be a great place to start.
And both of these things that Thinkling Stearns and I have mentioned are also just good ideas for dads to encourage a culture of reading in your home, which is going to do a lot more for your family and their even spiritual maturity. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm going to agree with you. So, and I got to credit my late wife with that because she wanted the kids to read. And when she looked into it, they said the biggest factor that makes kids want to read is parents reading to them. So she just made part of their homeschooling. They read a half hour a day, and the kids that's like normal to them. And then she started having Evan read to Abby, and that really helped it too. So I would say that's good. And then I'm going to add one more thing to this one because it sort of goes. Something Robin had read somewhere, and I asked her about it, and she didn't know where she read it, and I'm like bummed because it's really cool. Is they said something to do to help yourself as a reader is to read above your level and below your level. And I think especially with kids learning to read, give them super easy books that they can just fly through it, build your confidence, you get better at it. It's like going for a walk one day after you're recovering in your workout, but then also like read stuff that's harder. And I do think that's really helped because for a while, all I was reading was the dense, heavy philosophical stuff for work, and throwing in Boxcar Children of all things was kind of like, well, that was easy. We just blew through that book. But anyways.
Yeah.
So summarize that how you will, Charlie.
Help me. How would you summarize it?
I would say if you have kids, read with them. Because you said include them into that, Tim, as a culture. And I would just say if you want to read more, pick books your kids want to read and read with them. And that's not going to be bad for you.
Well, and I think as just finishing a semester where we had a class, Discipleship of Children, and I think all of the main thinkers that we kind of consorted there would say something very similar, that reading out loud is very valuable. And I've appreciated in the past when we've done things like that. It's hard for us to pull that off anymore. Yeah. But we have done that on numerous occasions where we would read page by page through things.
It does help. It really does. Mm-hmm. There's something about it that's valuable.
And so my main, I'm going to have two as well, but I'll do one. We'll come back around the circle. So I think one of the common questions that people ask is similar to, how am I going to find the time for this? Tim encouraged us to, set the time. And you're like, well, what? I don't have time. Well, you do. Maybe you just don't realize it. But a part of finding a time to read is to relent to the replacement that's necessary. If you are thinking and considering that reading more would be valuable to you, well, where is it on your assortment of values? And if you're going to bring something higher on that list, by nature of bringing something higher, you're then lowering a lot of other things. And there are some things in life you just can't stop doing. But where is reading going to fit into that? And then how is that replacement going to take place? You're not just going to like snap your fingers and magically find it. You're replacing something. And so when you're thinking about like, well, where am I going to find 30 minutes to listen to my audiobook? That isn't as, important to me. But if we were to say, where am I going to find the time to read the Bible? How valuable is that? And how much time is appropriate? 5 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't think, I don't think there's a ton of value in, grand gestures of like, I'm going to read an hour of my Bible every day for the rest of my life. I so solemnly vow and swear, like if you want to, great. But I think you should be careful about making a vow. But so if it was scripture reading, if it's more technical, challenging reading about some topic you're interested in, if it's just rando fictional reading, you're going to replace something.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the most helpful thing, is to look at the way you use your time right now and just do an evaluation. Like, what would reading consistently replace on my list of values? And then relent. Like, yep, reading is more important than these things. So when I normally want to go do that thing, have I read today? And you can have that conversation with yourself, or think about it yourself, but then enlisting some help there too. It's like, hey, I don't want to play video games if I haven't read my Bible. And, wherever you are in your life context, if it's someone from church, if it's your spouse, if it's, someone in your home, a friend, whoever that is, enlisting help to solidify that replacement is going to be really helpful. So that would be how you want to read more. You got to figure out what you're replacing and then have some accountability to actually make that replacement.
Part of that accountability could be the formation of a Thinklings group.
Yes.
So I don't know if that was going to be on either of your two lists, but that was something that I was going to mention. I have a group of three pastors and myself, and we get together 3 times a year, and it's going to kill an afternoon. So what I'm basically saying, getting together with these guys is important enough that I'm going to drive. I'm going to spend 2 to 3 hours on the road. I'm going to spend a couple of hours at a coffee shop with them, and it's going to take an afternoon for three times a year. We read a book in advance, we get together, we fellowship. I think men, I had to do something with this, maybe a content in the future, but I think men are starved for real friendship and the formation of a Thinklings group that centers around something wholesome, like reading could be the foundation for a good building of friendship and thinking and being godly, better men. So just a couple of conversations that I've had recently with a couple of individuals, it's made me start to wonder, I think guys really just need to get together, and they're envious of like a Lewis Tolkien. Honestly, sometimes they're envious of us and that we have this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just need to not take that for granted. But you might think, oh, well, so-and-so at church, they're not going to really be interested. Well, you might want to ask them and form a group.
Well, and just to think about that, what is that? If you were to find 1 or 2 other guys in your church, and that's where we're not all the same church. You guys are, but it's a unique setting, but if you were to do that with a group in your church, what is that? That is discipleship.
Yep. Bing, bing, bing.
Sometimes we think of discipleship, and I really want to push people in discipleship to having those one-on-one conversations, and I think there's a value to that intimacy in a discipleship relationship where it is one-on-one, because there's just different layers of
Right.
trust there.
True.
But discipleship is not only that.
Right.
It's discipleship when your pastor preaches to 200. It's discipleship when your choir sings. It's discipleship when you and a group of buddies get together and talk about books. And especially if they're in your church, that is not to beat the drum again, but that is worthy of replacing other things in your life.
Yep.
And it is a
Mm-hmm.
priority
Mm-hmm.
that you have to make. But yeah, that's a great thought, Tim.
So I would say for my second tip, and this is born out of my life this year, is if you can't read, it's still really good to listen to books. Honestly, there's a book that I listened to, it's just hard. I would consider it reading, even though I know it's not really reading, it's listening. But when I think about this book, I'm like, I read this book, but oh no, I technically listened to it. But I got the content, I would say, as well as if I had read it because of the way it was working. So we drove over like almost 6,000 miles in the summer for Robin's radiation treatments. And I would just pop a book in, not all the time because she's right there and we're chatting, but I mean, all the way back to chemo in the spring. That's a lot of hours in the car. I got YouTube apologetics debate lectures that I listened to. That's a lot of time. And so I would say if you have a commute, that is a time where you could just pick one book and stick with just that one book and see how long you can. You're probably not going to listen every day if you got other things you listen to, but try. And then there's a bookmark feature on the app I was using to where I could bookmark and go back to those spots on my paper copy because I happen to have a paper copy of that one. But the other thing I want to say is that there's other times in my life that I was able to find where I had time to listen that I didn't realize. So in the morning when I wake up, got to grind my coffee beans, get the hot water going, pour the coffee, make my oatmeal. Or if I'm really being healthy, I'm eating eggs, but I have to like warm the pan up, oil it, wash it when you're done. But I have noise canceling headphones. And so I found that I had about 20 to 30 minutes in the morning where I could listen to books. And I know you're thinking like, oh, you're just barely awake, you couldn't handle it. But like you said, Charlie, it kind of wakes your mind up, especially if it's an interesting book. So that was one place I didn't expect it. And then the second one that I should way more often use is walking on the treadmill. I can listen to a Kindle book with my Kindle right there, and it's highlighting the word that's being read. And then I can stop it at any time and make notes on it. So I started Death by Living by N.D. Wilson, and I'm probably like a third of the way through it, and it's only been when I'm on the treadmill, which is not often enough. So I would say, okay, I'm not reading those books, but I'm consuming and getting a lot of the content as though I'm listening to the author give the lecture.
Yep.
And that's actually really valuable. I have a friend who lived in Pella and commuted to teach in Des Moines every day for like 7 years. He went through, I think it was over like 600 books in Audible. And that's like a massive education. And he just disciplined himself that he had like a cup of coffee. He would refill it halfway, drink the rest of the coffee. And that's like a big deal. So I would say if you can't read and you want to, it's still better to listen, I think. So that'd be my recommendation. If you can't read, listen.
Yeah. And with audiobooks, I would say you'd put a premium on audiobooks that are narrated by the author. If they're more
except a wing feather.
No, it's okay. You do what you got to do. But there's an author that I've read, and it has nothing to do with theology. The guy's an atheist and evolutionist, whatever. But he has a couple of books, and he talks about the process he went through of one of his early books being purchased for audiobook, and then he didn't have the rights to narrate it. And so he has this little anecdote of him listening to his book narrated by someone else. And he was like, he hated it because this guy does not know the points I'm making. And so the emphasis is wrong. And so just keep that in mind as you are listening to books, if they're not fiction, because you can't really screw up fiction. The story's the story. Yeah. But if you are listening to a technical book, it might not be accentuated the same way the author would. Good audiobooks obviously would, but so I would just say a premium would be put on an audiobook narrated by the author, because then I think you get more, because you're getting to hear that from them. And I think that's abundantly helpful.
In the industry, that is not recommended.
Well,
just kind of interesting.
Change the guard, baby.
But like seriously, like because we were looking into it for Song of Songs for Singles and having it narrated, and my wife has actually critiqued some books that have been narrated by the author, and she didn't like a couple of them because how somebody writes and how they speak are different. So it's kind of interesting that you share that. And I'm thinking through this. I'm like, we went through this with Song of Songs for Singles, and you're recommending exactly what was not recommended. So it might be more of a.
I'm not saying only listen to those, or you have to always. But if you found a book that was, I think that you are hearing it emphasized the way the author
wanted it done.
And didn't Coco say that? I thought Coco mentioned that in one of the interviews, that he was going to read the next one because he had heard the first one. It was okay, but he would emphasize a couple points differently. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was off air. I don't know.
Well, because I did listen to Story of Reality from Greg Koukl.
Yeah.
And
when he narrated it?
He narrated it.
Oh, interesting.
What was so insightful about that, because we talked to him.
Yeah.
And so like you grab that book differently because it's from the author.
Yeah.
And and it struck me a couple of times because we had talked to him, like, oh, that's a very Greg way of saying that.
Yeah.
And it would be missed, I think, from another. But that being said, it is not the industry standard. I would just say if you found a book like that,
Yeah.
I think you are hearing what the author wants you to hear at that point. So just putting a premium on their intention.
So I need to pull back my earlier statement, not wing feather. So what I would say is in fiction realm, you have different things you want. You want voice acting, you want distinct characterization, and not everyone is adept at that. And I would just say that whoever did the first round of the wing feather books, I liked Poto's voice better and all those. And when Peterson, I listened to the first two with that guy. And then when I bought the next two, it had been years later. And it was Peterson reading them. And he wasn't bad. He was really okay. You need to speed him up a little. But his range of characterization wasn't quite as much as the other guy. But also, like, for Green Ember, that's a fiction. For Fellowship and Lord of the Rings and all that, that's fiction. I was saying N.D. Wilson's Death by Living, and Wilson narrates it, and it is like him talking. And I can tell exactly what he wants to emphasize. At times, I felt like he was going a little overboard. Because he's like his dad. He's very spicy in how he says things. And he's kind of got this, like, whatever personality at times. He says this and then this. And it was just a bit overacted in my mind. But most of the time it was really good because it's exactly like, oh man, he is emphasizing that. And since I know he's the author and I know he's emphasizing it, that's really what he wants me to catch. But if I read it, I may not have picked up the same way.
Yeah.
So I like your point, especially in nonfiction. I think that's a very good point.
I think Tim's point is interesting too, because think about people that are really skilled at writing. They're probably not really skilled at voices or
not always.
Yeah. I think that'd be you're playing to another skill set that authors maybe don't have.
Right.
And what a modern issue to have. Like, if you're listening to the audiobook, make sure it's narrated,
21st century probs.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were hearing this, be like, what are you talking about? I mean, they had recordings, but just,
what a waste of our time.
Yeah. Anyway, is it my turn? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, that's my last piece of advice. So
I'm done.
This is it's not a sponsor, but I will say one of the things that really helped me in 2023 was Bookly.
Oh yeah, I should have mentioned that.
And where you can,
Bookly was
on
phenomenal.
your smartphone, you can scan a book in, you can track, and why would you want to track how much you're reading? I do think it's just really helpful to know, based on how fast you read, like they're going to tell you, you need X amount of time to finish this book. And then there's also the gamifying it where like you have a streak of like 10 days. Do you want to lose that? And there was a streak. I went like 4 weeks reading every morning because I was like, oh, you've gone so long. Don't break it now. And that's helpful. Like, instead of, playing Clash of Clans on your phone, gamify your reading, like.
I think I had a 54-day streak and I lost it and I was so ticked. And then the inverse happened. I was like, whatever. And so for like a week, I didn't even read. And then when I went back to read, I'm like, well, I'm not going to log. It was stupid. It was totally stupid. But Bookly's been helpful. It also allows you to take photographic pictures of the text and then it copies the OCR quote. And I thought that was nice. You just have all your quotes right there if you want them. So I'm gonna give a +1 to Bookly. And we should tell them to sponsor us.
Hey, Bookly, if you're listening to this, you're not a real person. You're probably just an AI. But so I don't think it has to be Bookly. I think there's a lot of things very similar to it. But I just think if you had an easy way to track what you're reading, and that is like, there's just a simple joy in progression. And if you're not able to keep track of how fast you're moving or how much time you need, it can be kind of cumbersome. And so I would just say some way of tracking what you're reading is going to be helpful. So any other thoughts? You guys are all wrapped up?
No, I'm glad you mentioned Bookly because we interviewed with Theologic around previous this time last year, like in November. And that's when I learned about Bookly then, or October or whatever. And that's when I started really using it. So it's great. So I have like a lot of books in there from this year.
Sounds good. So a final meditation for us in God's Word that relates sort of to this idea of reading. And I just want to preface the comments with this. There's a lot of things in life that are more exciting, air quotes, more exciting than reading a book. At least in the modern world, you could watch a show, watch a movie, go out, spend time with your friends, da, da, da. And obviously reading is not mutually exclusive from those. You can go and read with your friends, all of those things. But reading, sitting down, dedicating an hour, 2 hours, whatever, a day, a week, to just sitting down and reading from that old musty book, that's just not exciting, is it? I want to do more fun things. And there's just a couple passages we've mentioned before. I call them my Hobbit verses because they talk about living a peaceful life. They don't want disturbances to the peace. They just want to live a simple life. And so here's 1 Thessalonians 4. I'm going to start reading in verse 9. Now concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. For that indeed is what you are doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia. And we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. Obviously, in the epistle to the Thessalonians, there's other context here as they're thinking about eschatology. Some of them are not working. I think that's a part of this is like you should just be living a quiet life and you shouldn't be depending on other people. You should be about your business. But I think a part of that is just, are you okay with minding your own business, having a quiet, peaceable life? And, are you content with just being at home reading a book? And not that one is right or wrong, but I think as believers, we should consider, do I take time to live a peaceful, quiet life? Do I take time to sit at home and read good books? And a very similar passage to that is, I get the numbers mixed up every time. It's not 2 Timothy 1, it's 1 Timothy 2. And I was typing it into my laptop and I realized the mistake I made. And so let's see, make sure I'm reading the right place. I'm not seeing what I want to see. Yeah, here we go. So 1 Timothy 2. First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions. So he's urging the brethren to pray, especially for the kings, the rulers. And what are we praying? That we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. Again, it's telling you, like, what does a virtuous life look like? It's not this big, exciting, fun, air quotes, life. It's, are you able to just be at peace and live a quiet life in your home and be about your business? That's why it's my Hobbit verses. The very next verse, so 1 Timothy 2:3, this is good, and it is pleasing in the sight of God our Savior. It is good to pray that you would have a peaceful life. And he's not praying for an exciting, fun, entertaining life, a peaceful, quiet life. And I think reading books fits into that. And so pray that God would allow you in this upcoming year to have a peaceful, quiet life that you build into times of reading good books, times of spending time with friends to talk about them, and to have that life of the mind. And so a quick thought there about a peaceful reading life that you can take with you into 2024. And thank you guys for listening. And we will see you next week on the Thinklings podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Thinklings podcast. We would love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, suggestions, or potential topics that you'd like us to discuss, you can contact us through our email, thinklingspodcast@gmail.com. Remember, don't let this conversation end with this podcast. Read good books, talk about them with your friends, and always continue to cultivate your mind. See you next time on the Thinklings podcast.